In this video, I want to continue to use the built-in adapters and show you guys how we can flesh out this example a little bit more, make it a little bit more real world with things like using our custom objects and custom layouts and on-click handlers and stuff like that, other list viewy type things that are really important. Of course, we'll have plenty of examples of more list views as we progress with the app. I just want to introduce the basic concepts here in this sort of isolated test project. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I don't want to have our array that is being rendered by our array adapter. I don't want to have our array using primitive types, using a string type. Instead, I want it to have, I want it to be the type of a actual object in, or actual class in our project that represents a customer in some way. Maybe it's a customer DTO, maybe it's a domain object, whatever. Basically, you see here how we're hooking up an array of strings directly to an array adapter, but that's not very flexible. Because if I were to, for example, want to handle a click event in our list view, what I would be getting back was a string, because that's the thing that we're adding to the list view, the string, without any sort of way to associate the string with an object. So a very common way to deal with this problem is to, instead of using a primitive type, to use a custom type of your own making. And now that's really easy to do, actually. So what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and show you guys how you would handle that. So to start this example, I need to create a customer class. So I'm going to right-click my package, go to Java class, and type in customer. And our customer class is going to have customary type things. In this case, I'm going to keep it simple and just give it a first name and a last name. And then I'll go ahead and generate a constructor, and let's throw in some getters too for our object. So now we have our constructor and we have two getters, so kind of a mutable structure DTO here. I can go ahead and mark these both as final as well. So basically, we have our customer. So I want to, inside of my main activity, use my customer class instead of my the string class. So to do that, I'm going to have to change the generic type parameters here on my array adapter and my array list, because the array adapter generic type parameter has to match the corresponding array list generic type parameter. So I'm going to change this to customer instead of string, and you'll immediately note a lot of squigglies. We got a lot of squigglies by changing that type, and that is because a string is not convertible to a customer class. So to fix all of our squigglies, we have to change these calls from, instead of adding in a string, adding in a new customer object. So we can go ahead and do that. Last name, whatever. Probably could have done this in a loop, but whatever. 2, 3, last name, 2, 3. We'll go ahead and nuke this last guy at the bottom here. And then finally, down here in our on options item selected, when we add a new customer object, we're going to instantiate a new customer, and we'll say added customer. So now, if we went ahead and hit run, all of this code will work. This code will compile, and it will produce an output, but it's not going to be the output that you might expect. Well, actually, you might ask yourselves, what do you think should happen? Because if you really think about it, should the array adapter really know anything about our custom type that we just made? So let's go ahead and fire up our awesome virtual machine over here and bring it over. And what we have right here is a three items, which is correct. We did add 3 customers, so we get 3 items back. But you'll notice that the text inside of them is all funky. If you're familiar at all with Java, this is the output of invoking toString on the individual object. So that's how the array adapter is going to convert from our custom class to the representation that gets displayed on the screen. It's going to use the toString method. So basically, in order to control how the list view or how the simple array adapter is going to present our items, what we can do is we can hop all the way back into our object right here, our class right here, and we can write our own toString method. So we can overwrite, so I'm going to use the override annotation, public string, toString, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a simple first name, last name sort of thing. So I'm going to say return get first name plus get last name. So by doing that, I can now hit run, come down here, and you'll notice that the output will now be what we expect it to be. And of course, we can add items as well, just like before. All right, so I guess that's pretty exciting. The big thing with that though is that allows us to get this object back when the list view is clicked. So we haven't really talked about that yet. We haven't talked about what happens. How do we select items with, or how do we add a event handler for selecting individual items? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just that. I'm going to say list view, and you'll notice that there are quite a few different listener invocations that or different events that we can handle right here. But the one I'm interested in is going to be the set on item click listener, so the click listener event. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter right there, and then I'm going to do new, and I'm going to do capital O, or that's not how you spell new, capital O-N, and then I'll hit enter. And of course that's going to create or stub out for me a anonymous inner class that implements the on click listener event. And so now what we have inside here is we have an on item click method, and this method is going to be clicked, well, when an item, or this method is going to be evoked when an item is clicked. So yeah, there's a couple things we can do here. So what we need to do, or what I want to do, is I want to get a reference back to a customer. I want to know exactly what customer object was clicked, and this is really where it becomes important to use your own custom domain types rather than primitive types when doing list views. And so what I can do here is I can say customer equals, and in this case, what I can do is get the object out of the array list or the array adapter. And so what I'm not going to be using this parameter here because of its generic type. The generic type parameter specified isn't a customer. So what I need to do here is I need to acquire a customer object from my private array adapter of customer or private array list of customer. And so what I can do here is I can say something like adapter.getItem. So the getItem method of the adapter class, well, it returns the item at that particular position. So I'll use the getItem method, and for the parameter, I'll use the position. So the position parameter comes in from the onItemClick invocation from the list view itself, and that's just telling us what position of the item, or what was the position of the item that was clicked. So now I have a reference to a whole customer object. In fact, I can go ahead and do something like toast make toast main activity dot this, and then customer dot get first name, and then toast dot short dot show. So I can do something like this just to prove that we are getting a full customer object out of the list view. So now you can see down here my toast is indeed being displayed. Also, I could do something, maybe make this a little bit more interesting, make this example a little bit more interesting by doing something like adapter.remove customer, which if you recall the adapter.remove method, I'm doing that as opposed to the customers .remove method, and the reason I'm doing that is because the adapter.remove method is going to not only remove the item out of my by backing array list, but it's also going to update the list view. It's actually going to say go off the list view and notify that the adapter has changed, and it'll re-render the now non-present customer object. So now what I can do is I can click on one of these items, and you see it disappears. So I can add items, and I can remove items. So that's all pretty exciting. So now we can handle clicks. It's pretty straightforward. It's just an event. We can also handle custom objects. But what if we wanted a custom view? So what if we wanted to write our own layout file that presented our customers in any way we want? We're going to do this in one of two situations. The first scenario is we're going to still use the array adapter, and then the second the second solution is going to use a different adapter. So for the array adapter, the way that we can specify a custom view, we can do it in one of two ways. Both ways require that we create a new layout file, so a new layout resource. So I'm going to open up my resources folder, go into my layout folder, right-click, select new, and select layout resource file. And I'll go ahead and say list item customer. And for the root element, we'll leave it as a linear layout. Okay, so there's two ways that we can do this. The first way is if our root element is a text view. So what I could do is I can replace this linear layout with a text view view and then use this special text view as a individual list item. Now that's not very flexible because that makes it so we, well, only have a text view. Not too exciting. So I'm not going to deal with that scenario. The second scenario that we're allowed to create a custom layout for an array adapter is when we create our own layout and then we have one text view inside of that layout that is marked as being the text view that's going to get the text for that particular item at that particular row. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll open up my preview window so I make sure I don't make any mistakes here. I'll go ahead and change the layout height to wrap content. I'll go ahead and give it a padding of, I don't know, 8 dp here, and I'll change its orientation to horizontal. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a image view. The image view is going to have a width of wrap content, a height of wrap content, and we'll give it a source of our IC launcher. So our bitmap IC launcher. That's when I'm testing out things, because that image comes along with all the project templates. When I'm testing things out, I usually use the IC launcher as a sort of a placeholder image. The next thing I want to do is create a text view. He's going to have a width of wrap content and the height of wrap content. I'm not too concerned about his positions. I'm going to go give him a default text. So I'm going to give him a text of item text. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can see where it's being positioned. Now, the text inside of this text view is going to, of course, be replaced at runtime with whatever the text of that current item is. But when I'm in design mode, I really like having some sort of placeholder text, just like we have that placeholder image, even though we're not going to change this using the adapter. Okay, so we'll have item text. You know, I'm not going to worry about centering it. Maybe I'll give it a margin start of 16 dp to get it away from that image. Anyway, I'm not too concerned about making this pretty. I don't really care too much about how this looks here. This isn't a video about layouts. I will, however, give it one thing that's very important, and that is an ID. So I'm going to give it an ID of @+ID, indicating we're creating a new ID resource. And I'm going to give it an ID of a list item customer. Ooh, that's not even close. List item customer underscore, and we'll go ahead and say name. That's what we'll call this text view. Now we're giving it an ID because we need to tell the array adapter about this list view. So it knows which view to, about this text view. So it knows which text view to populate with the text of the current item. All right, so now that we have that, that's actually all we need to do inside this layout. We could do anything else we want in this layout. We can throw in additional controls. If you wanted to, you could probably do nested list views. That would work. Whatever you want to do. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple. Now we're going to jump back into main activity, and let's go ahead and change our code so that it uses the new layout file. So coming up here to where we instantiate our adapter. So this is where we create our adapter, and this is where we tell it how we want it to present our items. The layout that we are using was currently simple list item 1. Now, simple list item 1 is literally just a text view. There's no view group, there's no parent, there's just a text view. And like I said, if the layout is just a text view, then the array adapter will populate that text view's text. But our example is a little bit more complex. So I'm going to change this layout to point to r.layout list item customer, but I'm also going to have to do something else. See, there's another overload on the constructor right here that I have to fill in because this custom layout isn't just a text view object. It's not just a text view view. It is a complex layout, which means I need to tell it where the text view ID is. I need to tell it what text view I want to populate it with. And that, of course, is going to be r.id list item customer name. And so now we've completed that constructor, we can go ahead and launch. And now we see our custom view. Now you see it behaves just like it did before. We have our scrolling behavior, we can add items, we can click on items, we get that nice little ripple effect and all that awesome stuff, but we see that we have a custom view inside of it. So we have our custom image and we have a custom text view, and the array adapter is populating the text within that text view. So that's pretty exciting, but it's not super flexible, because another thing that you may want to do with a list view is you may want to have multiple bits inside of your custom view that get populated with different fields. So you see right here we have our customer object, and its toString method is basically all the text that gets dumped in there. However, what if we wanted to have multiple columns for whatever reason? So now we can no longer use the array adapter. Basically, we've reached the extent of what is possible with the array adapter. It's a very simple adapter. It works very well for lists of basic objects that have just a text field. It works very well for lists of numbers and strings, but it's very important to know about the array adapter because it can save you a lot of work. But if you want something a little bit more complex, if you want an image and some text, if you want multiple fields, if you want a first name in one column, a last name in the other column, anything like that, you have to look beyond the array adapter. So what I want to do is use a different adapter called simple adapter. I'm going to go ahead and I'm basically going to remove all of this code right here. So I'm removing all that code so that we can, and I'll keep in, well, I guess I can, I'm going to go ahead and remove this array list just so that we can see exactly what's going to, or what's required for dealing with this particular adapter, because it's very different than the array adapter, because how it works is it works in sort of columns. So basically what we need to do is the underlying data structure for this adapter is not an array list. Well, it is, but it's not a list of sequential items. It's specifically going to be a list of hash maps. So or a list of maps. So basically, what you need to do here is I need to go ahead and do array list, and then we will have a hash map of string and string, and we'll call this data, and we'll instantiate it as well. Okay, so what is data? Data is going to be the data we're going to pass into this adapter, and it needs to be populated with, well, as you can see, instantiations of a hash map. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say data.add, and I'm going to pass in a new, so watch this, I'm going to pass a new customer, customer1 last name, dot to hash map. And then I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm aware that I have not created the toHashMap method yet. So what I'm doing here is I'm instantiating these customer objects, but then I'm converting them to a hash map. And then I'm going to use IntelliJ to create that method for me. I'm going to hit Alt-Enter to hash map. And then on the hash map, to hash map, I'm going to say hash map string of string, or string and string, return value equals new hash map. And then we'll just populate return value. We'll say put first, or we can capitalize that, get first name, and then we'll say return value dot put last name, get last name. So, and we'll return this. So we see that we're converting our customer objects into a hash map of string and string. We could include other information that we didn't necessarily want to display, such as an ID, for example. Jumping back into main activity, we see the code now compiles. So now we have our data. So that's the way the data is going to be organized. It's going to be organized with basically an array of hash maps of strings. So this looks a little intimidating, but you can think of it as just a list of key value pairs. If you're familiar with C#, this would be a list of dictionaries of string and string. So now what we need to do is we need to create our adapter. So I'm going to be using the simple adapter, but the adapter is going to need kind of a mapping between the properties of the hash maps and IDs of where to stuff that data into for a custom layout. So before I can write this code, we need to go ahead and write a layout file that will hold our tabulated data. So what I'm going to do is, over here in the layout folder, I'm going to right-click, select new layout resource file. Let's say list item customer _2 to differentiate it. I'm going to make this a linear layout, orientation of horizontal, layout height of wrap content, and I'm going to place two text views in here. And they're both, I'm going to say match parent and match parent for layout, or the height I want wrap content. I'm going to give them both a layout gravity of 1. And one of them, a layout, I always get layout gravity and layout weight mixed up. Layout weight of 1. And then we'll go ahead and give it an ID of activity, or whoops, list item customer to first name. Then I'm going to create another text view, layout width match parent, height of wrap content, a weight of 1, and an ID of list item customer to last name. And I'm going to go ahead and give them both dummy text inside. So I'm going to say first name right here and last name right there, just to make sure that I'm getting my positioning right. So we kind of have this tabulated data right here. And then maybe at the top of the linear layout, I can give it a padding of 8 dp, just so it looks a little bit better. Now what I need to do is when we use this array, this adapter, what we need to do is we need to map our properties of our hash maps to those IDs of those text views. So what I can do is I'm going to create two arrays. I'm going to create a string array, and the string array is going to be called hash map properties. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize it to an array of first name and last name. Then I'm going to create an int array, and I'm going to call this text view IDs, and I'm going to initialize it to two ID resources, r.id list item 1 or list item customer to first name, and r.id list item customer to last name. Now I have all the information I need to create my adapter, my special adapter that'll allow us to map multiple fields to each layout item. I have the data itself that's going to be presented. I have the hash map properties that need to be mapped, and I have the corresponding text view IDs. Now the way it's going to work is these guys are going to be lined up. So basically, they're going to be related by index. So the first name is going to relate to the text view first name, and the last name is going to relate to the text view last name. So let's go ahead and instantiate our adapter. I'm going to say simple adapter equals new simple adapter. And for its constructor, which only has one, we'll pass in the context as the activity. For the data, we'll pass in the data. For the resource, we're going to pass in r.layout list item customer to, so that's going to be the XML layout file. For the from, we're going to pass in hash map properties, and for the to, we're going to pass in text view IDs. The last thing we need to do is get a reference to our list view and actually add our adapter to our list view. So I'm going to say list view equals list view, find view by ID, r.id list view, and then I'll say list view dot set adapter, passing in adapter. All right, so let's go ahead and hit play. So the simple adapter doesn't look so simple once you write it out. It is a little cumbersome to work with. I'm only showing it to you guys in the cases where it may be appropriate to use, but in the next video, we'll definitely find a more flexible solution to working with adapters. And as you can see, our tabulated data was indeed presented. So again, the list view, or the simple adapter, is more complex than the array adapter, which I find hilarious given their names, but it's more powerful. And it still has limitations, though. You don't have full control over how the list views are displayed. For that, you need to write your own adapter. So I just wanted to show you guys the two basic adapters, and if you can get away with using them, it'll save you a lot of code. If you need anything more complex, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I'll show you how to write your own adapter. All right, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video.